this morning. It's very exciting to have all of you here with all of the different activities that are going on all over. So we appreciate you taking the time to be here this morning. I would like to acknowledge some of our key leaders in our area that have helped support us through the years and help grow the organization. So our Board of Supervisors, we have a few Board of Supervisors. Please stand, please. Thank you very much. Our two auditors are here, county auditors. Thank you, Carmen and Tammy, for coming. We greatly appreciate that. I'm not sure, are you guys hidden? Where are you? I can't see you.
Right back here.
All right. And I really have to say I greatly appreciate our board of directors on the Kossuth and Palo Alto. You've helped so much over the years. You volunteer your time, you volunteer your knowledge, your input. We've grown our revolving loan fund greatly and helped establish new businesses in our area and existing businesses, and we greatly appreciate all that you do for our area. So would our board of directors for Kossuth and Palo Alto please stand? And please, very much. I would also like to say that it's an honor to have some of our legislative staffers here, Kobe DeWitt and Jim. Where are you? Please, thank you very much for coming. I also want to very much thank our people, our caterers in the back, Linda, Gary. Thank you very, very much. And the helpers, the RSVP volunteers. My goodness, thank them. They're volunteering their time this morning. I also really have to highlight some very special people in my life. And I don't want to cry. But these people I get to see just about every day, and they make things happen. They work very hard, they're very diligent, they're very dedicated. And they're very, very dedicated to making our organization be the very best that it can be. And I know that our board of directors know that the most. And that is my staff. So Tricia, could you step forward, please? Robin and Linda. I want all of you to really give them applause beyond, because they work very, very hard. And I have two outstanding, I always have outstanding interns, but I have two very outstanding interns, and they just happen to be sisters this year. It's Reese Rosemeyer and Riley. And those two girls, they really go to work in our office. Thank you very much. We also have a wide array of support, and on our boards we've identified all of our support that have been given to us, and thank you very much for help supporting to make this breakfast happen and to have this great speaker that we're going to hear in just a few minutes. Okay, you know who you are. So, to begin the morning, I have some very special acknowledgments. And I have two wonderful people that I get to work with as the leaders of our organization. And they have grown over the years to become the presidents of our organization. And I'd like to have Rick Brennan and Jason Wartek come up. These two men have been my sidebar and have calmed me down a few times, have listened to a lot of what we have going on. They think through a lot. They provide a lot of great leadership over the overall area, and they think regional. And that's so key to our area. And so I want to give you both a very special thank you. Maybe I'll just have you keep those here until the end. So Jason, thank you very much. Fred, thank you very much.
1 second for a photo.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Also, this is a very special moment for us. We have to acknowledge 2 great leaders that we have been able to have on the Kossuth Board of Directors. And it was Craig Myers and Charlie Kennedy. And we so appreciated them. They were so good. Anytime I needed to have them, they were a phone call away, or they came into my office and they sat down and they talked, gave me directives, gave me their opinions on what needed to happen. Most of all, I so enjoyed the humor and the ability to laugh and the ability to talk about their lives, their family, and how important and key that was, and that really made who they were. And this year, we want to acknowledge their leadership over the years that they have provided to us. And we thank you so very much for allowing them to be a part of our organization. So would you, Roberta and Ella Gray, would you please come up? Roberta, thank you very, very much. And we so appreciated Craig. Craig was during our COVID time period, and Craig was just absolutely wonderful. He would call so many times and say, "Are you doing okay? Is everything going all right? Do you need anything? Can I help you with anything?" And that was so great. So thank you very much. Would you like to say anything? Ellen Gray. Charlie was a very special friend, and Ellen Gray knows very well that he was a great confidant to fight. So when I needed to have really some one-on-one personal conversations about decisions that needed to be made, Charlie was one I could go in and sit down and talk to. And he would look at things very broad-based, but always very regional. What would be the impact regional? And I so appreciated that. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Please acknowledge And now, I would like to have our interns. We have the chairs from our interns come up, Amanda Tilches and Reese Rosemeyer.
Hello, my name is Reese Rosemeyer, and I have been a summer intern with Kossuth Palo Alto Economic Development for 2 summers now.
Hello, my name is Amanda Tilges, and I'm the summer intern with Farmers State Bank. Reese and I have been designated the Intern Advisory co-chairs for the 2022 Summer Intern Program.
Throughout our time, we were able to learn a plethora of skills that will greatly benefit us as we continue down our career paths. Kossuth Palo Alto Economic Development has hosted a variety of intern training and networking events this summer that cover a wide scope of skills and concepts that are critical in the workplace.
The leader of one of our training sessions even explained how she had begun as an intern at the very company, and now that opportunity has turned into a job and career. This solidifies the importance of the intern program and the positive impact it can have on one's professional life.
This summer intern program would not be able to happen without the generous support and donations from all of the local businesses who continue to invest in the future of the area through the intern program. They understand. They understood the value of this program and may have benefited from hiring their interns full-time. For
From myself and all the other interns, we would like to express our thanks to everyone who has donated time or resources to ensure the success and continuation of the intern program. Without you, these opportunities would not be possible.
Now, we have kind of a special award. And I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of information about this person. I met this person. She was actually an intern at one time. She was at Kossuth Regional Hospital. And she then got married. And she was in HR at Aluma. I got to really, and started really getting to know her quite well. And over time, she moved into a different position, and now she's just always like a phone away. But this very special individual is one that she serves on 2 committees of ours. She has been chairs of those committees, not once, but a couple of times. She is one that when we need something, she jumps in and she'll say, I'll be glad to do that. I can handle that. She will call into the office or she will email and she will say, is everything okay? Do you need anything? I would certainly be happy to help you with anything that you have. That's a very special volunteer. I will tell you, any time that we send her an email, she always returns it back and says, thank you very much for your email. How kind is that? This person, if you hadn't gotten the hint of who I'm talking about, also has a twin sister. and now I get to reveal who this very special person is. And she is the one that actually recommended our speaker for today. And I would like to call Brianna Marceau.
So, as Maureen said, I did start in the county as an intern for Kossuth Regional Health Center. The value of an internship is phenomenal, and I had some really great mentors along the way, which is how I came to be the person that I am, and I love the volunteer organization. I sit on the chair for the intern group. I know the dedication and the value that it provides, and then I truly enjoy sharing between our county members in the HR field. That's the other program that I'm involved with, and I've always enjoyed being able to share that expertise and get opinions so that we can grow our 2 counties and the businesses that we have here. Because we do have some really phenomenal, great businesses, whether it's through healthcare, manufacturing, the whole gamut. So I guess that's a little bit about me, but thank you very much. I had really no idea. It's just been truly a pleasure.
So thank you very much, Brianna. I'm going to introduce our next speaker because she's the one that recommended us to have this speaker.
So I got to hear Kit at a conference that I attended. So I was very pleased to be able to recommend him here this morning. Today's speaker is Kit Welchland. Kit grew up on a hog and dairy farm in southern Minnesota and began public speaking at the age of 9 in a 4-H public speaking contest. How fitting for February. At age 21, he purchased his first manufacturing company, and by age 26 served as CEO and chairman of the board of 3 manufacturing companies in 3 states. Kit has a bachelor's of science degree in speech communication, business administration, and political science, and received a master's degree in speech communication and business administration. In 1991, Kit started Welchland Communication Strategies and Seminars on Stress, providing speeches and seminars to private and public organizations. Kit taught part-time for 26 years for the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities, where he received the Teaching Excellence Award and had been repeatedly nominated as Outstanding Faculty. Kit is a professional member of the National Speakers Association and has earned the Certified Speaker Professional designation. In 2014, he's inducted into the Minnesota Speakers Association Hall of Fame. He's delivered more than 3,000 speeches and seminars to more than 500,000 people over the past 27 years. Please join me in welcoming Kit Welchman.
Thank you, Brianna. Thank you for that flattering introduction. My goodness, after an introduction like that, I can't wait to do it, I have to say. I'd like a copy of that. So the next time somebody says, hey, who do you think you are? Something I can tell them. Great to be here with you. A couple of things I'd like to clarify as we get started. Brianna mentioned that I began public speaking at the age of 9. That was not out of desire. That was out of necessity. You see, when I grew up on that hog and dairy farm just east of St. James, I was the youngest of 4 sons, no sisters. And I grew up in a position-centered family, not a person-centered family where everyone would have an equal say or an equal vote. No, there was a true hierarchy in the family where my dad had the most authority, then my mom, then it went from oldest to youngest, and I was the youngest. So what would happen around the dining room table is my dad would say something, then my mom would say something, then Cabot, Kelly, Corey, and then they changed the subject. Always had a terrible time getting into the conversation. But in 4-H, I could get up in front of a club once a month and give a 5 or 10 minute speech without interruption and really haven't stopped since. Then I went to school at Kent State, became a college dropout. I left college after my junior year when that little manufacturing company came up for sale in my hometown. And the reason the business was for sale is because the gentleman that had started the company in 1972 had already suffered a massive heart attack by 1983, so it looked like something I should get involved with. And it was a stressful business. The presentation I deliver the most often is called STP, Stress, Time, and Procrastination Management. Coincidentally, the presentation I deliver second most often is handling difficult people, dealing with people you can't stand. So I don't know if there's a correlation there or not. But things turned out just fine. The business did grow to 3 companies in 3 states. So at 21, I bought my first manufacturing company. I was the youngest employee, had no technical expertise. I was a CEO and $450,000 in debt. Really getting places quickly. And that was a lot of money back in 1983. It's still a lot of money today. But I had a business mentor that told me, Kid, if you owe the bank $50,000, you're in trouble. If you owe the bank $500,000, they're in trouble. So, interns, careful selecting your mentors, okay? but things turned out just fine. But at that young age, I noticed there was a difference in the generations when it came to work, the assumptions or expectations. Now, my oldest employees that we'll be referring to as veterans and traditionals or the silent generation, they would always be to work, if we weren't running 24 hours a day at the time, they would always be to work maybe 45 minutes early. And I would say to Kenny and Bert and Willie, hey, you know what, you could come a little bit later. I could get another half an hour of sleep. People aren't coming here for another 45 minutes. But they wanted to get the coffee ready, wanted to get the equipment on, the lights on, and they were there early. And then the baby boomers, which I'm on the cusp. I'm a very young baby boomer. Every time we had a meeting, they wanted to be recognized for their hard work and contributions, and they did work hard, they really did. And then I found it quite interesting towards the end of my career in manufacturing when younger employees, or at least interviewees, would be negotiating their hours before I'd even offer them the position. And that was interesting because everybody else would follow those shifts as we have described, that they wanted to negotiate those a little bit. But there really wasn't much research to support that there were some differences across the generations when it comes to work. So that's what we're going to be discussing. So we're going to spend about an hour and a half together. I think the time will go by quickly. This morning, as I was getting ready, I stayed at the Wild Rose last night, just west of town, or east of Amherstburg and west of Europe. Anyway, I stayed there last night, and this morning, as I was getting ready, my oldest brother, who's a police officer, called me and says, "Hey, you want to meet me for coffee?" And I said, "No, I'm in Iowa this morning. I have a presentation this morning." And he's a police officer, but he doesn't like that stereotype of police officers having coffee and donuts. Whatever he calls it, it's for coffee. And usually a donut's involved, so I don't know why he has a problem with that. And I said, no, I have a presentation this morning. And he said, "How long is that going to last?" And I said, "About an hour and a half." And his response was, "Who can listen to you for an hour and a half?" I'm going to guess over the last 30 years he has said that, I don't know, 700 or 800 times. Still thinks it's pretty funny. Gives me great material for my heavily biblical people presentation, that's for sure. But I think the time will go by quickly. Now, the slides that I'm going to share with you, once I find my slide and answer, there we go, thank you. Oh, that's good, that's fine. You're all going to get those slides. They're going to be posted on the 2 websites for Kossuth and also Palo Alto County, so you can access these. So you don't have to take notes. You're going to get everything. Not about having a handout, but the latest information I have is in the PowerPoint slides. So I think the latest information is really what we want to apply. So you'll get all the slides, even the silly stuff. Hope you're okay with that. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to be talking about communication across the generations at work. And the reason we need to understand this is because we spend more time with the people we work with than the people we live with. And we claim we love them. I don't count sleeping time as quality time with my family, so we spend 8, 9, 10 hours with our coworkers, and then a small amount of time we get to spend with our family and friends, and then of course we're back to work the next week. So these are important relationships. And so when we talk about communicating across the generations, I like this simple communication model. And it kind of looks like a giant fly's head. You see yourself in the left eyeball, you see the other party in the right eyeball. And the reason I say other party is because I think working together should be fun. Thank you. Thank you. I'm usually the only person. I'm usually the only person that thinks that's funny, so it's catching on. Okay, great. We have all sorts of ideas, rules, regulations, policies, and procedures. We have all this information. We package that into words, and we send messages by arrow over to the other party. They think about what it is that we've said. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they disagree, sometimes they don't understand. But they always provide us something magical in communication called feedback. So I guess the good news in communication or leadership is there's no such thing as failure, just feedback. Just feedback. I mean, if we can take our ego out of it, I think working together can be relatively easy if we can just take our ego out of it. It seems so simple. It's hard to believe I can drag out a presentation for another hour and 20 minutes talking about this. But there's some problems with that communication model. And the main problem is this. I want you to imagine you're literally sending those messages by arrow. First bump into each other in the parking lot, see each other at the county fair, see each other at a community event over the weekends, attend a meeting together, a professional event. But every time you interact with the people you work with, you're sending messages to them by arrow. Some of those messages and arrows attract people to us and our ideas and our organizations. Some of those messages and arrows just simply drive people away. What are we on? This is August already, isn't it? Huh, it's right in the center. 6 months ago or 6 months from now. What's the big deal about February 14th? What's the big deal about February 14th? Oh, I got to you just in time. Well, what's the big deal about February 14th? Yeah, Valentine's Day. Yeah, there's a little fellow running around shooting arrows at people. Who is that? Cupid. And Cupid would be sending messages of love. Oh, how would it feel when you get hit by one of those Cupid's arrows? Wow, feels pretty good. Somebody says, I love you, I care about you, be mine. Oh, with those messages, those arrows pierce our heart. Wow, feel pretty good. But how many of you know or seen or maybe been the victim of a teenager? Anybody had a few of those of your own in your house? Do they always send Cupid's arrows to their parents? No, enemy arrows, poisonous darts. They'll say things like, drop me off at the corner, I don't want my friends to see you. Or, why of all the people world have to be my family? When those messages, those arrows pierce our heart, they kind of sting, they kind of hurt. The bottom line of communication is every time we interact with the people we work with, we're either attracting them to us, our ideas in our organization, or we're driving them away. There's nothing in between. People either like you or they don't. People either trust you or they don't. People either do what you ask or they just won't. So we have a tremendous responsibility as a leader to package those messages in a way that attract people to us rather than driving them away. Because attraction of younger employees right now is pretty difficult, and then retaining younger employees is quite difficult. So to attract and motivate and retain, we want to make sure we're sending those Cupid's arrows. And it's minor adjustments. And so for each one of the generations, we're going to go through a series of slides on how do we attract, how do we motivate, how do we retain, and we just make a minor adjustment. We'll talk about why it's not manipulation, it's just effectiveness when it comes to communication. But we do know this. People who lack strong relationships have 2 to 3 times the risk of early death, regardless of whether they smoke, drink alcohol, or exercise regularly. Now, please don't misinterpret that statistic. That doesn't mean you can lay in the sofa, drinking booze, smoking cigarettes, eating junk food, live a long, happy life as long as you get along with your staff. That'll help. But it's not going to solve all the issues. So I want to share with you the 5 laws of communication as a foundation, and then we'll go into how do we just tailor our comments to fit the different generations. So the good news is this, we saw this with the communication model. Communication is a process. We send messages, we get feedback, we modify the message, we get new feedback, and the interpretation of the message is accurate, then we can move on. But before we start shooting those arrows around or shooting our mouth off at work, I really would like us to put these 6 criteria of personal credibility in place. It comes out of the best book I ever read called Reaching Out, Interpersonal Effectiveness and Self-Actualization by Dr. David W. Johnson. He dedicated an entire chapter to this list. He found in his research if you're lacking any one of these qualities, you're lacking credibility. 5 out of 6 doesn't cut it. 4 out of 6? Man, that's even worse. Take a look at the first one on that list. Consistently appear warm and friendly. What's the out-of-pocket expense of appearing warm and friendly? Nothing. It's free. I have no idea what it costs us if we're not. It's one of the 6 criteria of being credible as a human being. Key word is consistently. Because I don't know if you've ever worked with difficult people. So let's say you go back to work this afternoon and you're all warm and friendly. What do difficult people think? What do you want? What are you up to? Would you go to one of those motivational speakers or something? That's what they'll say. Let's say you have been, I said that just for my sake, I think. Anyway, let's say you have been consistently warm and friendly. One day next week, you go to work, you go straight to task. No friendly chit-chat with anyone. Ooh, what do difficult people think now? Grump, grouch, but they had a fight with their spouse. Oh, I bet it's their kid. They'll just make it up. So the key is to be consistently warm and friendly. It's not that you walk in every day, high five and back slap and saying how great it is to work together every day, but nobody worries. Who showed up today, the happy person or the unhappy person? You're even-keeled, pleasant to be around. Then you express your intentions and motives, short-term plans, long-term goals. Call you at 10 o'clock. I'll stop by at 3 o'clock. And you do. So the majority of people find you to be trustworthy. Appear warm and friendly, express your intentions and motives, follow through. Then Johnson says you need to be an information source, and that is knowing knowable information. What's pinned, pasted, posted on the walls, guidebooks, handbooks on the website, what comes with the job, if your job's redesigned, training's provided, become competent again, to the point that you develop something called relevant expertise. That in certain areas of what you do, you know more about that than anybody else. And when people have a question about that, they seek you out for the answers rather than wasting their time talking to anyone else. You're the in-house expert, resident expert. And then the last on the list is dynamism, which is natural enthusiasm. Dynamism isn't that you're doing calisthenics and jumping jacks in between phone calls and meetings, but dynamism is when you walk in the room, the lights get a little bit brighter rather than a little bit dimmer. When you come to work, people are happy to see you rather than resenting the fact you showed up again today. And they're all free. I have a question for you. It's not a trick question. It is a mathematical equation. I'm going to say it twice. Be careful with your answer. What's 3 times 3? Careful now. What's 3 times 3? Go ahead. 9, thank you. The reason I'm so careful about that is not too long ago I had someone shout out 6, and man, that's hard to respond to. So it's 5 times 5. 25, you're awfully good at this. What's 6,842 times 3,875? That's a lot, isn't it? But if I give you those numbers again, and you all wrote them down, you could all give me the answer, couldn't you? Why? Because you know the formula. Been 59 years on this. That's the formula. It's 3 times 3. It's 5 times 5. But I've noticed over the last 38 years, it's also 6,842 times 3,875. You take a look at somebody that's suffering or stumbling in their career right now, 1, maybe 2 of those missing. And if they could just put that in place, it'd be a lot easier for them. And a lot easier for us having to work with them. And they're all free. Can you imagine if you had everybody in your organization show up like that every day? The impact you'd have in your industry and your community? You wouldn't have any competition. But it's all in how people perceive us. So let's take a look at this for a second. Communication is complex because there's actually 6 perceptions going on in our relationship with another person. Who I think I am, who I believe you think I am, and really who you think I am, and then from your side of the relationship, who you think you are, you believe I think you are, really who I think you are. There's got to be how many of us in the room? Do we know how many, Marina? How many people are here this morning? 140? times 6. So we have 840 perceptions going on all at the same time, trying to figure out, are you buying into this, going to make that adjustment? A lot of smoke and mirrors when it comes to perception. But that's what gives us a chance to create a culture climate and recreate it just how we interact with each other. Now there's a great little book called Secrets of Successful Speakers. It claims half the impact on how you perceive me for the entire hour and a half we spend together. Half the impact on how you perceive me occurred in the first 5 minutes, like quick drying cement. So how'd you perceive me in the first 5 minutes? Jacking unbuttoned, hand in my pocket, saying a few silly things like thank you, Grant, for that flattering introduction. My brother saying this morning, we can listen to you for an hour and a half. How'd you perceive me in the first 5 minutes? This is where we have the lively interaction between the speaker and the participants. How'd you perceive me in the first 5 minutes? Fun? Okay, has a sense of humor. Not a good one, but he has one. Doesn't seem like he's going to give it up. Okay, what else? Enthusiastic, motivated. Why don't we keep going with these? Yeah. Let's say instead I started my jacket button. And I said, good morning, my name is Kip Welch. Today I'll be sharing with you some strategies and techniques that will work if you put them to work. Now, how do you perceive me? Professor? Formal? Stiff? Stuffy? Opinionated? My opinion will tell you mine. I love saying that. It's kind of naughty. I love saying that. So I think, well, the jacket's kind of formal. It's kind of sloppy unbuttoned. So I think what I'll do instead, I'll just go ahead and start by rolling up my sleeves. So instead I start by saying, good morning, my name is Kip Welch, and today I'll be sharing with you some strategies and techniques that will work if you put them to work. Now, how do you perceive me? Serious? It's going to be a lot of work. If you register, it's going in your personnel file, whether or not you attended this morning. It's going to be a little harder hitting all of a sudden. All I did is I put on a jacket, I buttoned a jacket, I rolled up my sleeves. For the most part, all I did was change clothes. But it instantly changes the way you perceive me, and I'm not kidding. Take a look at this. It may take as little as 100 milliseconds, a tenth of a second, to form an impression of another person to decide whether or not he or she is attractive, trustworthy, competent, and likable. A tenth of a second. It takes 2/10 of a second time to change a facial expression. We're lucky. According to Princeton University, that's less time than it takes to form a rational thought. Take a look at that list. Attractive, trustworthy, competent, and likable. I'll tell you what, if it took 10 years to be accused of that, it'd be worth it. I always tell my good friends in city and county government, they're held to an unfair standard. People watch them leave their house in the morning, they take a look at their watch, we take a look at our watch, well, they can't be downtown in 6 minutes. Because we're paying their salaries. When I work with county highway departments, they'll see a car or truck coming, they'll just grab a shovel, start moving some gravel around, because everybody's got a smartphone to take a picture of them leaning on a shovel, because we've never leaned on a shovel, right? Isn't it amazing? When it comes to the generations at work, I can be presenting this information and be 20 years older than I am. I could be presenting this information and being 20 years younger than I am. I've been doing this for 31 years. I don't know who I thought I was when I was 29. But anyway. Oh, wow, sorry, just a little flashback there. Okay, but it has an impact in a tenth of a second. According to Princeton University, that's less time than it takes to form a rational thought. So in a funny sort of way in our relationships, it's opening night every day. As we pull into the parking lot, as we walk to the building, as we walk down the hallways and come into meetings and strike up conversations, it's opening night with every one of your relationships a tenth of a second at a time. Can't leave it a chance. You're going to be a leader, recognized as a leader, you've got to make those connections. It has to be consistent. Law number 3, messages, not meanings, are communicated, which simply means messages aren't words, meanings aren't people, and how they interpret those words. I never realized how powerful this law of communication was until I got married. I thought my wife and I both spoke English, but it must be different dialects, because we often apply different meanings to messages. I was delivering a presentation in Milwaukee. My wife chose to go with me on the trip, and we're driving from Minneapolis to Milwaukee. We were just about to Boston, where that Quick Trip is with that semi-trailer, stick straight up advertising there, and nice McDonald's back there and everything too. But anyway, just about to the Wisconsin Dells. And I turned to my wife, and I said, I really look forward to the day you and I travel more together. And this is what my wife did. She did just like this. She had this bitter look on her face. I mean, it looked like she was looking for a place to throw up in the car. And I really practiced what I preached. I said, wow, thank goodness, I was warm and friendly. Perception can't be a problem after all these years. So about a mile down the road, I turned to her and I said, honey, what do you picture when I say traveling? And she got that same bitter look on her face and said, a Winnebago. I said, what? She said, a Winnebago. I said, what do you mean? She goes, you and I driving all day in a motorhome. Now, traveling to me was to jump on an airplane, fly somewhere warm for a week, and come back to go to work. For 17 years, my wife thought I was going to whip into the driveway in a Winnebago. Not like Winnebagos. I mean, I must have been leaking out in my communication with her. But this is somebody I know and love and believe I understand better than anybody else, and we don't apply to the same meaning to the word traveling. Can you imagine when you work with a diverse workforce from 16 to 76, the difference we can have in interpretations, expectations, and assumptions in the workplace? I'll tell you what, if you ever say to someone, oh, I know exactly what you mean, my mom would wash her mouth out with soap. And I remember what that tastes like, but she would wash her mouth out with soap. We have a hunch. This is the crazy thing about communication. As human beings, we retain about 25% of what we hear. But according to a study by Dr. Ronald Adler, only 25% of what we remember is accurately interpreted. So if my math is correct, when we run for the doors at night, at 9 o'clock, you'll have 6.25% of what I meant. I can't tell you how many times I've been quoted for things I haven't even thought. So that's why you're going to get all those PowerPoint slides, because I don't want you to leave it to chance. So you want accuracy in the words you choose to use. Accuracy is the precise shade of meaning. Are you happy? Are you thrilled? Are you worried? Are you concerned? What are you? There's over 3,400 words in the English language for feelings and emotions. 3,400 words. Dr. Robin Lakoff asked men and women how many feelings and emotions they have. Men listed an average of 8 out of 3,400. Really good ones. 8. Women listed an average of 14, which is nearly twice as many, but that's only 11 words on the average we're using to describe a possible 3,400 different feelings and emotions. I think we could be a little bit more accurate. But you also want to use simple words everyone feels comfortable with and can understand. If a longer, less familiar word can be substituted with a shorter, more familiar word, please do that. I don't think we impress people with a large vocabulary. I think we can drive people away. I think people would rather feel informed rather than ignorant. I grew up ignorant. Doesn't bother me. People use a great big word, I say, is that one word or two? How do you spell that? What does that mean? But most people aren't as confident with their ignorance as I am, and they have kind of a thin skin. Now, people think I'm kind of chubby, kind of poorly. No, this is thick skin. That's what this is, thick skin. Do this for 30 years, you'll develop a thick skin. So we want to use simple words everyone feels comfortable with and can understand. And we want to make sure, accuracy and simplicity kind of go hand in hand. A large bank recently announced they're going to start charging for free checking. They also announced they don't understand the meaning of words. So, okay, I'm going to remove that slide. That's your way. Let's try this one. Okay. We also want to provide coherence. Even in our conversations, just the more organized your conversation, the more credibility you have in the conversation. What's your name? Bruce. Let's say I catch Bruce in the hallway and I say, Bruce, I'd like to talk with you. And he says, sure. So I start talking about last year's budget. Now I'm talking about the next year's strategic plan. And then I'm talking about that new employee, Carol, and you're thinking, what? Where are we going with this? How long is this going to take? I mean, wow. Well, what a difference is that, Bruce, can I talk with you for about 5 minutes? And you say, sure, I have 5 minutes. Actually, I'm going to talk about 3 things. Last year's budget, that's the new strategic plan, and then that new employee, Carol. And you're like, in 5 minutes? And I say, sure, that's plenty of time. So I start talking about last year's budget, when we were right on the numbers and where we missed the mark. And then we have this new strategic plan, this initiative, we're headed this direction. But Carol has had this part-time position. And she does such a fantastic job. We're going to offer her a full-time position. And she will be in charge of this new initiative. And how do you feel during that conversation? Informed, yeah. And when I got to Carol, I was about villain, right? So you can anticipate the conversation rather than being a victim of it. So if we can provide a little coherence at the very beginning, then people feel more comfortable with the information we're going to send. And you got to be careful with this thing called language intensity. Almost anything we talk about, there's 3 different levels of language intensity. We could use highly positive language intensity, highly negative language intensity, or neutral language intensity. And sometimes people play around with it, and it's not very effective. Take a look at this. The publisher has released a modern version of the Bible, maybe a little too hip. It refers to the disciples as wingmen. Yeah, I think it's a little bit too highly positive, or is that highly negative? I don't know. It's a little confusing, that's for sure. And then there's talk about another set of layoffs at Whole Foods. Be aware of that. Of course, supply chain issues. Although this time they're just going to call it furlough of employees, free range employees. I don't know if that's going to help or not. I got another one. Here we go. Now, Warren Buffett, I don't know if some of you have Bitcoin or not, but compared Bitcoin to rat poison, which is unfair, because people understand how rat poison works. Understand. Bitcoin, a federal court has just ruled that curse words can now be trademarked. So some of you may owe somebody some money. That's what I understand. Last one, I promise. A lot of people work in a cubicle has to think outside the box. Okay? Even though their desk is basically in a box. So we want to make sure the language is precise, simple, provide coherence, and then of course, language intensity is appropriate to the relationship and appropriate to the situation. So there's a great little technique. I don't care what generation you're from, or in, or communicating with. It's called the SEER method of explanation. You make a statement, you explain it, you give an example, restate it. Follows our natural train of thought. If I say something, you're wondering, I wonder what that is. I explain it, then you're thinking, I wonder how that works. And then I restate it because I can't remember what you called that. I remember the first time I sat down to write seminars and workshops for 3M. I sat down with a group of engineers, and they said to me, "Kid, we'd like you to write some curriculum for us." I said, "Well, I could write a seminar or workshop for you. Yeah, that's what we want." I said, "What's it concerning?" CEE, for HPMOs. Otherwise, it's going to show up in our EC and DP. I said, "Wow, it sounds important." They said, "It is." I said, "What's CEE? Constrained equipment effectiveness. What's that?" So they explained it to me. "How's that work?" Gave me some examples. And you call that CEE, constrained equipment effectiveness. Then you said HPMO. Ooh, what's that? High performance manufacturing organization. What's that? So they explained it to me. How's that work? They gave me some examples. And I said, and you call that HPMO, high performance manufacturing organization. Then you said EC, yippee or something. EC and DP. What's that? Employee contribution and development process. What's that? So they explained it to me, gave me some examples, and then I restated it, and you call that EC and DP, employee contribution and development process. So as a listener, you can gather the information with the SEER method, but also presenting the information, you can just do it by providing guidance without pointing it out. So let's back up the slide here a little bit. When I got to this slide, I said the words we choose to use need to be accurate. That was my statement. My explanation was accuracy is a precise shade of meaning. I used examples like happy, are you thrilled, are you worried, are you concerned? I reinforced that with the information from Dr. Robin Lakoff that men list an average of 8, women list an average of 14 out of 3,400 possible words for feelings and emotions, and then I anchored it, restated it with, I think it could be a little bit more accurate. Look how magical this is. You make a statement, explain it, give an example, restate it. What was listening retention? 25%. You lock down retention. You make a statement, you provide a unique explanation, you provide unique examples and restate it. You also lock down interpretation. When you can lock down interpretation, you lock down retention. People walk out of the meeting doing exactly what you hope they would. Now, if you're asking people to change, you got to sell these 4 P's. The purpose, a good reason why. Status quo isn't cutting it. The numbers aren't right. Picture what could the future look like. Sometimes you have to go somewhere and see it. Sometimes people have to see it to believe it or describe it. Choreograph some sort of role play so they can experience it. And then the plan. This will take a week. This will take a month. This will take a year. Seems pretty well thought out. And the part they play and how vital and important that is. You sell those 4 P's, people will follow you through fire, or at least shallow water. That might be all you need that day to get them moving that direction. So this is where it comes into play with the generation. 60% of teenagers do not have a basic understanding of finances. So those of you banking, it's an Iowa State banking. Although I can't be critical because I have a brother that just found out a 401k is not a type of marathon. So I don't think it's age specific. Anyway, we want to make sure we follow those principles. Now law number 4 is one cannot not communicate, which simply means no matter what you say or don't say, people apply meaning to it. But the number 1 most admired quality of a co-worker and a leader comes out of a book called The Business of Communicating, is to be a good listener. Number 1 and most admired quality of a leader or co-worker is their listening skills. You gotta look like you're listening. So you'll see this acrostic stable. S stands for squarely face the other person. What does that tell people when we squarely face them? We're giving them our what? Full attention, undivided attention. We used to claim you can always trust a square shooter, so it implies trustworthiness. T stands for tip your head when you're following along. Nod your head only when you do agree. Clean up those head movements. A stands for attentive facial expressions. People say things you agree with, you should smile. People say things you don't understand, you should look a little bewildered. They say something you disagree with, you might want to squint. You don't necessarily want to frown and do the stink eye. But you do want to let them know that's probably not going to happen. Barrier-free environment. Remove the barriers between you and the other person. Maybe we can go into a conference room. Maybe this is something we should go out in the shop and talk at their workstation. Maybe this is something we should talk about over lunch. maybe this is something we should never talk about over lunch, but consider the barriers, remove them. L stands for lean forward slightly, show your enthusiasm as a listener. And then the E, of course, eye contact. But beyond eye contact, we should have the word normal. It's not a staring contest. You can blink, only extraterrestrials don't blink. Normal eye contact in North America is 1.8 to 2.6 seconds that somebody needs to blink. Now there is a big company, a large corporation, reportedly banned workers from looking at each other for more than 5 seconds as part of its new anti-harassment rules. Looking at anyone longer than 5 seconds in that organization is considered creepy. So you want to make sure you really balance your eye contact. Normal eye contact in North America is about the length of one sentence in conversation, about 1.8 to 2.6 seconds, and somebody needs to blink. Now there is a book called High Performance Living and High Impact Communication that claims if eye contact lasts as long as 10 seconds, that only occurs 2 times in human interaction. One is intimidation, the other is intimacy. So that person that you make extended eye contact, first thing they will think is, oh my goodness, they're trying to intimidate me. Then your second thought is, oh no. So I really want to be careful with the eye contact, that's for sure. So we want to make sure we cover law number 5 too. And this is our dovetail into the hour we're going to spend strictly on generational communication. There's always 2 elements to communication, the content and the relationship. Content is the issue, the relationship is the individual. Content is the problem, the relationship is the person. Our job as effective communicators is to tailor the content, fit the relationship, help people make a good decision, feel good about the decision we've asked them to make. That's the least we can do for people. And there's 4 intentions that people usually have that are important to them when it comes to the workplace. Getting it done, whatever it is, getting it done. The semi's coming to pick this up at 10:30, it's got to be on the dock. Paperwork has to be ready, it has to be processed. Or it might be a certain phone call that we need to be prepared for that we're going to take, or a Zoom meeting, or whatever it might be. So whenever anybody says, doesn't anybody realize it's got to be shipped by Friday? Doesn't anybody realize we only have 2 hours before the deadline? Their whole focus is getting it done. Of course we want to get things done. And if we're going to do it, of course we like to get it done right. We like to make sure every I dotted, every T is crossed. Some people focus more on that sometimes than just simply getting it done. Getting along, we spend more time with each other than we do with the people we live with. And of course, we want to have some messages about have a nice weekend, have a great day. It's a pleasure talking with you. Thank you. And then the last is appreciation. Appreciation is saying thank you for your effort. Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I call this the magic pixie dust of communication. So I'd like you to think about, with these 4 intentions, is if we don't provide those messages in our communication, people have a concern. So when people worry about it not getting done, they become more controlling, more demanding, more forceful. They raise their voice. They, point out the delays or the mistakes. And when somebody wants to get it done right and they fear it's going to be done wrong, now they become perfectionistic, point out every potential flaw. Are you sure you filled that out correctly? You've done it 1,000 times. I like to stab it in the thigh. You can't do that. You say, yes, I believe I did. Because their concern is it's got to be right. It's got to be perfect. Now if someone wants to get along with you and they feel left out, they'll exaggerate their behavior to become more approval-seeking, go out of their way with relational messages to try to win your favor, but they don't get their work done. And then people want to get appreciation and they're not getting any, well, they're going to get some attention around here. They'll throw an adult temper tantrum, or they'll go silent for a few days and say, you haven't said anything for a few days, are you okay? At least they're going to get some attention because they didn't get any appreciation and they turn into people we can't stand. So I want you to have a ready reference of phrases that you can say that people know you're going to get it done. That's at the top of my list. It'll be the #1 priority. I'm on it. They're going to get it done right. Let's review the conversation to make sure we haven't missed any of the details. Let's take a look at the military spec to make sure that we're living up to what the expectations are for that client. Whatever are those specific criteria that it's done correctly, accurately, validate it, review it, any of those phrases. Get along, have a nice day, have a great weekend, look forward to seeing you on Monday. Here's my card. Call me any time between 9 and 3, Monday through Friday. And then appreciation. Thank you. I really appreciate your effort. I really appreciate you providing this. Now, any email, any phone call, any Zoom meeting, somewhere in that conversation, we want to sprinkle magic pixie dust. we're gonna get it done. We're gonna get it done right, we get along, and I appreciate you, because if you don't do that, so this is how it'll work. I'll just say to Maureen and Linda, thank you for inviting me to speak this morning. There's some appreciation. We started on time, we ended on time, got it done. Thought it went pretty well, got it right. And I look forward to working with you again. How long does it take to say those 4 messages? I have time in 6 seconds. You have 50 phone calls in a day. Or if you had a template that you could just pull those phrases out of in your email. 50 phone calls a day, 6 seconds, that'd be 300 seconds, that'd be 5 minutes out of your day. Sprinkle the magic pixie dust. We're gonna get it done, we're gonna get it done, right? We get along and I appreciate it. But if you don't do that, you spend the other 9 hours and 55 minutes of the day dealing with people that are controlling, perfectionistic, demanding attention and approval. That's exhausting. This is kind of fun. That's horrible. I mean, this is enjoyable. Just a suggestion. I'm just going to make suggestions from this point on because I don't really go around giving people advice. I really don't. Because Socrates was a man that went around giving people good advice. I understand they poisoned him, and they're saving me a breakfast. No. I'm not going to take any chances. So let's take a look at the generation specifically, and you're going to get all these slides, don't forget it. The other thing I think that Maureen and Linda wanted me to mention is, I do have to exercise. I mentioned a book that my favorite book I ever read, but this is the favorite book I ever wrote. So the green book is called The Communication Kit. And there's these little chapters in here, I call it kind of a bathroom book on communication, of about a dozen different areas, whether it's customer service, communicating change, communicating across the generations, leadership, those type of issues. It's a fast read. It's kind of silly, but it's also packed with serious information. Usually $20. And goofy guys, if you ever go to my YouTube channel, there's about 300 videos that you have access to that are free, that are in playlists. And people often will go there and grab them. It takes just 3 minutes to have a little video that's lighthearted to get the conversation started. So that one is green, which means you have to pay for it. Usually it's $20. Today it's $10. You buy that for $10, you have your pick. The first book I ever wrote, Communication Kit Volume 1, which is still a good book. I like it. A book called Voices of Optimism, which came from a collaboration with the Optimist Club in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Amazing workplace where I provided a chapter on navigating the kind of the currents of conflict. And then I have a book if someone's interested in how to become better at public speaking. It's a book called The World's Greatest Speakers. So that one is also available for free if you buy the green book for $10. You can have your pick until the one of those other books. So that's it on that. Okay, that's a big sale. It's pretty persuasive. You can go to that chapter on persuading and influencing. Nothing else that we need to do before we get too far down the road. Somewhere at your table, one of your chairs has a sticker that has a label that looks just like this. And if you're sitting on that chair, and it's under the seat, you get these centerpiece. You get what's in that bag. So would you do that? Would you take a look and see if you've won your table centerpiece? Take a look into that one. Your table decoration. Something Okay, so that first 45 minutes or so is to lay down the foundation on effective communication skills. Now what we do is we take those strategies and we apply them to the different generations. It's not manipulation, it's just effectiveness to attract and retain and motivate staff and customers and anybody else that we have involved in our business. So originally when I first started doing research on this topic, which was about 15 years ago, it was for an IT company that had millennials that were managing older baby boomers and Gen Xers. And it was built upon how can millennials establish credibility, how can millennials become leaders that are respected and create those relationships and rapport and cohesiveness and connectedness. At the time that I first did the research, this is how they broke down the generations. The veterans and traditionals born about 1922 to 1943. That's my mom and dad. My dad's a 1925 baby, my mom's a 1931 baby. Baby boomers 1943 to 1960. I'm a 61 baby, so I'm right on the cusp of this one. My 3 older brothers are 4, 5.5, and 7 years older than me. They're baby boomers to the bone. When we go through the baby boomer information, they can take their picture and put it at Wikipedia. That's them. Now, Generation X from 1960 to 81. My wife was born in 62, and she's a Generation Xer to the bone. She negotiated her hours. Oh my goodness, that must have been 35 years ago. And, no, not quite, because our daughter's 29, so it would have been 27 years ago when she negotiated her hours. 30 hours a week, as long as she hit her numbers. And so that has continued. And then millennials, I have 2 millennials kids and then 1 Gen X and Gen Z. Now, it was mentioned in the introduction, Brianna mentioned that I taught for 27 years for the Minnesota State colleges and universities. The reason I did that is because I believe those college students are going to be my future clients. And I would teach 2 classes, and I would get about 500 reaction papers, handwritten reaction papers, drove them crazy. For every chapter in the textbook, what did you recognize, what would you do, what would you never do, what do you think of this, what do you reject, and I would get about 1,000 of those a year to understand the generations of how they see work, how they see their relationships besides the textbook we were working from. So the main reason I taught was to understand my clients and the different generations when I started teaching back in 1991, fall of 91. And I have 1 Gen Z daughter. So here we go. And Pew Research says, no, those dates aren't quite right, and I'm not exactly sure why they adjusted them, because I think they're pretty close. They said, no, traditionals really go until about 1946 at the end of the war, and then baby boomers from 46 to 64, so it kind of shifted about 4 years, and then Gen Xers from 64 to 80. 80 to 2000 got backed up to 1995 because of technology and the internet. So they said, wow, that's a little bit different, so then they put the Gen Zs from 1995 to the present, so they would be somewhere in their early to mid-20s. And then the millennials somewhere mid-20s to late 30s, and then the Gen Xers somewhere around 40 or so to middle 50s, and then boomers, late 50s to early 70s, and then the traditionals and veterans older than that. Now 1% or so of the workforce are still traditionals and veterans. And we certainly know this, when I work in long-term care, many of the volunteers at long-term care facilities are older than the residents of the long-term care facilities. And you have a client base in rural communities that are probably older too. So whether they're not co-workers, they're certainly going to be customers. They're going to be people who have influence in your community and the decisions that are going to be made. So we're still talking about veterans and traditionals because they have a tremendous impact and they're wealthy. Okay, here we go. A little baby boomer came out there, sorry. Now, we're not the only ones dealing with this shift in the generations. There's a global youth tide by 2020, so a couple of years ago, supposedly, and who knows now with COVID, and whether the numbers came out, or I don't know. But right before COVID, India, Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia expected that those born in 1990 and later would be 60% of their workforce. But here, in the United States, by 2030, millennials and Gen Z, the youngest 2 generations, will make up 75% of our workforce. So we really need to know how to connect and retain them as our key employees. So why are the generations so different? Well, in our formative years as we were growing up, there were some significant events that had an impact on our assumptions and expectations about life and work. So the oldest generation, it was patriotism, Great Depression, World War II. When it came to baby boomers, it's the Vietnam era, Civil Rights era, Women's Liberation Movement, Gen Xers, Watergate, who couldn't trust big government. And at the same time, companies like, companies like, not IBM, AT&T, were laying off 2,000 or 3,000 people at a time, but it wasn't hitting the headlines. They're also hiring 2,000 or 3,000 people at a time with a different skill set. So that generation, with Watergate, can't trust government, and also you can't trust big business. So they also came home to homes, the first kind of single-parent home kind of phenomenon. And then MTV came out in 1980, and that's when it actually was music television. I don't know if you've walked past MTV lately. I don't think there's any music on there, is there? And then HIV. Now, when I give seminars on stress management, which in some form or fashion, I've delivered a presentation on stress management more than 600 times. If I'm dealing with cardiac survivors, people that have had a heart attack and are baby boomers and traditionals and veterans, I'll say, what's the number one killer in this country? They'll say heart attack. Yeah, you're right, And if I have a college student class and I ask that question, they'll often say AIDS or HIV, which is fascinating because we have not had as many people die from HIV that die every year from heart disease. But the emphasis was on that. So those messages are pretty powerful. School, violence, Oklahoma City, and multiculturalism for millennials and Gen Y. And Gen Y is how closer to the year 2000 when they were born. And then Gen Z, they're digital cloud natives. They grew up with the internet. And they had the 2008 recession, which will show the impact that had on their optimism. And then, of course, they've grown up with a smartphone in their hand and social media, which is sometimes positive, sometimes destructive. So, big social differences. Now, if you want to recognize the generations from a distance, traditionals, well, they'll dress up. They'll have like a 50th wedding anniversary. People dress up, come to an event, and there'll be a program. Nylons, golf clubs, mixed drinks. My wife and I lived in an older neighborhood in Edina. When I say older, everybody was older. They all built and bought those homes right after World War II. We lived in the Johnson's house and never called it our house. And that first summer, Mary Ann was having a 4th of July party, of course, patriotism. And I came around in the backyard, and Mary Ann said to my wife and I, "What would you like to drink?" And I said, "What do you got?" And it was all booze. It was vodka and all the liquors. And I said, well, "I'd have a beer." And Mary Ann goes, "Beer? I think my son Barry brought over some beer." So she went down the back stairwell. It must have been several years ago that Barry brought over it tasted like road ditch beer. Sit out in the sun for a couple of summers. Wow. Baby boomers tend to have European imported cars, designer everything, whatever's trendy. And now the cosmetic surgery, Gen Xers. This one, a lot of nose and navel rings and tattoos showed up. Our youngest daughter, when she came back from college, we went out to Valley Fair that summer and pour around. And I came home and I said to my wife, I think I was the only parent at Valley Fair that didn't have a tattoo. And my wife says, "Are you saying you want to get a tattoo?" I said, "No, but I did get a hand on barbed wire and both biceps." Millennials and Gen Z, mobile devices, text messaging, and of course their smartphones. According to Pew Research, an Indeed study found 78% of millennials and Gen Z job seekers use mobile to search and apply for their jobs. So is your approach in attracting employees mobile friendly? Can they do that with your organization? Find those job opportunities and apply for them with their mobile device or not? Now, I always break it down this way. Most of the time we end up in our careers being responsible for at least $1 million budget. So let's say 78% of your budget is one account. That's a $780,000 account. Somebody would notice if the money's missing. This generation notices it when they're applying for a job. So I probably, if we're not able to do that, probably get on that this afternoon. And then traditionals, what's the big deal? Well, traditionals complain about the younger generations expected to give us so much so fast without paying their dues. And then the baby boomers complain how they've given years to the organization to be laid off or maybe passed over in favor of younger employees who have maybe more knowledge about technology and cost less money. And then Gen Xers complain about how they're tired of being treated like lazy slackers because they want balance in their lives. I wonder why the other generations don't seem to like them. No, Gen Xers aren't lazy slackers. They give 100% of work. 12% on Monday, 23% on Yes, this presentation does contain content that may offend some participants. Sorry. Millennials complain about being put in the same category as Gen Xers when they'd like to be judged on their own merits. And then Gen Xers resent traditionals who are probably their parents for being resistant to change and unwilling to hand over the reins. I deal with a lot of family farms where we talk about succession planning and communication across the generations. I know my mom and dad feared with the farm that when they passed away, their baby boomer sons would just sell it and lay on a beach for the rest of their lives. And my parents are exactly right. That's what we're going to do. I pitched manure for the first 21 years of my life. Grind-feed almond earth, a vicious cycle on a hog and dairy farm. Anyway, over that. Baby boomers resent Gen Xers for finding it so easy to change jobs whenever they feel like it. Demanding balance in their lives when a baby boomer would never have asked for such a thing. And then traditionals resent the millennials for their entitlement mentality when traditionals had to work for everything they've got and start at the warehouse door, work their way to the front office. On-the-job training, as we used to call that. Millennials resent the boomers, who are probably their parents, for leaving the planet a mess when they are the ones supposed to clean it up. Okay, I gotta intervene here as a baby boomer. The EPA was actually established by President Nixon in 1970. Air pollution is down at least 70%, according to that study. America's polluted waterways have been cut almost in half from 2/3 in 1970 to 1/3 today. And the hole in the ozone layer is healing, and they estimate by 2050 it will be completely healed. Okay. So a culture that's been shaped by, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars when I was in manufacturing to make sure to support that. So a culture has been shaped by the values, standards, and policies. One generation aren't necessarily compatible with another. And then we throw in a lot of technology, and it kind of exacerbates the tension. And so we want to make sure to figure out how to work together better. So do we have anything in common? That's always a good question. Across the generations, do we have anything in common? Yeah, a couple of things. I went into a coffee shop that didn't have Wi-Fi because I wanted people to actually talk to one another. And the only thing we talked about is that we wish we had Wi-Fi. So I guess we do have something in common over time. But I'm sure you saw this in the paper. There's a 101-year-old guy graduating from high school, and he's going to go to college. Did you see that in the paper? Now, what does he have in common with his college classmates? Well, exactly the same chance of paying off his student loans. So according to the American Student Assistance Survey, we did the 76 of millennials and Gen Zs. Remember, $1 million budget, $760,000 account. So the student debt assistance would be a deciding factor in accepting a job. When I was still teaching a night class, I asked my students, and there's usually about 24 in the class, how many of you are having your tuition reimbursed by your employer? And it's a 100-level speech course. And it was nearly 20 every semester, about 20 out of 24. Their employers were paying for that 3-credit fundamentals of speech class. And they were working part-time. Okay, spending style, since we're on to money. The oldest generation save or pay cash. My parents never had a car payment. They just wrote out a check when they needed a car. Last time they bought a new car was a 1967 Pontiac Catalina. Ever since that, it was a used car. Boomers buy now, pay later with plastic. Better be credit well off. Gen Xers cautious and conservative with their money because they don't believe there's going to be much left for Social Security. And then Gen Zs spend their parents' money as fast as they can. And millennials too. Yeah, okay, there's that warning again. So let's take a look at this Bank of America survey back in 2018. 1 in 4 millennials worry about their finances, but take a look at this. 67% of millennials who have a savings goal stick to it every month. 73% of millennials have a budget, stick to it every month, or most months. 47% of millennials have $15,000 or more in savings. 16% of millennials have more than $100,000 in savings. So I don't know if they're not doing too bad, I don't think. Now, in an Everbright study, 78% of millennials and Gen Zs prefer spending money on events and experiences rather than possessions. So think about how you recognize and reward younger staff, and is there some way we can make it more experiential? Is there some way we can have more events and experiences rather than, just financial compensation? They might enjoy that more. So you're going to get 8 broad categories of the differences between the generations. So let's just take a look at these, and then we're going to race through how you're going to communicate across those generations based upon this. Traditional's chain of command. Boss said so. Must have been a good reason why the policy was created. Baby boomers' change of command, of course, women's liberation movement, civil rights movement, Vietnam era. Gen Xers, self-command, came home alone, don't mind being alone, very self-reliant, independent. Millennials and Gen Z don't command, collaborate. They want to be part of an organization where they get to have a seat at the table. According to Gallup, 88% of millennials and Gen Zers would rather work in a collaborative culture than a competitive one. Our youngest daughter works for a corporation that they'd really like her to move out of marketing into sales. But she doesn't want to do the competitive part of it. And she's one of the most competitive people I know. I mean, even playing, what was that, Princess Monopoly, or whatever that was? Oh, wow, she turned that over. Shoots and ladders, She's better now. But anyway. Oh, she's competitive, but she doesn't want to go into sales. Oh my goodness. Anyway, career goals. Oldest generation build a legacy. They want to have a reputation that will be respected long after they're gone. Baby boomers build a stellar career. You'll see this where they put a wing on a nursing home or a hospital with their name on it, or a building at a university with their name on it. They want their name, in light. Gen Xers build a portable career. When I first hired Gen Xers in this business, at the time there was a book out by Tom Peters called Crazy Times, called Crazy Organizations, and they said the most effective performance appraisal system for Gen Xers was their resume. And you pull it out every 90 days. What new software have you learned? What new skill have you developed? What's new on your resume? As long as there's something new on their resume, every 90 days they're going to stick around. Because they knew if their resume got stale, they were becoming obsolete, and it'd be harder for them to find their next job or next career. So they were going to take it upon themselves to make sure they're always prepared for the next gig. And then millennials and Gen Z build parallel careers. They might want to work in the front office for a couple hours in the morning. They might want to work in the shop in the afternoon. It might be they want to work remotely on Friday. If there's a bike-a-thon, a jump-a-thon, anython in town, they want to be there handing out ice cream, representing your organization. And part of that is because as parents, we had activities for them before school, after school, on the weekends, and it was compartmentalized. They want that kind of a same dynamic when it comes to the job. If you ever hear a millennial or Gen Z say, I'm not sure I want to do this the rest of my life, you got to swoop in there like a SWAT team. I say, I understand you don't want to do this the rest of your life, but can you just hang in there till Friday? Can you just hang in there till Friday? When it comes to rewards, the traditional satisfaction of a job well done, pride in their own workmanship, and then a boomers, money, title, recognition, corner office. I remember taking a class, Urban Regional Studies, where it talked about the social hierarchy of organizations because you needed so many corner offices, so you needed so many floors so people could have corner offices. Isn't that fascinating? And then Gen Xers, freedom is the ultimate reward, that time off, that independence, and then millennials and Gen Z, work has to have meaning for me. Now when it comes to that meaning, this is well worth it. If we can sell the impact that it has in our community, or our customers and their families and their communities, or over the world, because that's what the Gen Zers are most interested in, are global issues. But according to Great Place to Work research, millennials and Gen Zers who found special meaning in their work were 6 times more likely to stay at their workplaces. So if we can identify not just the products and services we provide, but the special value, the special meaning that it gives to that person that has the opportunity to experience that, we're miles ahead in keeping those younger generations. Now let's take a look at balance. Now when it comes to the traditionals, supported me in my shifting balance. That oldest generation tend to retire from something, not to something. Baby boomers tend to retire to something. They'll start a consultancy, they'll start a nonprofit, they might start a charter school, but they usually retire from one position to go into something else. Gen Xers can be balanced now when I'm 65. My next older brother is an orthopedic surgeon, and he has probably 50 employees. The physicians and the PAs and the nurse practitioners, probably 4 of them are baby boomers, and the rest of the staff, Gen Xers and millennials. And I think there's a couple of Gen Zers in there too. He'd love to run his clinic on Wednesday nights and Saturday mornings. How many people does he get to volunteer for that? 0. Nobody. They want balance in their life. He says, I'll pay you more money. Of course, he's a baby boomer. That's what he would suggest. They want balance. They want it now. They don't want to wait. Millennials and Gen Z works and everything. I need flexibility. So we want to provide that. I was working with the U.S. Probation Office not too long ago. And they have a mandatory retirement at 57. That was the first time I was presenting to a group, and I realized I'm the oldest person in this room. And I thought, wow, that really came up quickly. And they have a 20-year pension program. So they can't hire anybody older than 37, because then they have mandatory retirements 57. And so they're hiring along, Gen Zs, not Gen Zs, Gen Xers. And they got into the system, kind of the golden handcuffs, If I stay this long, 20 years, I get a pension, it's good benefits, yeah. But then they started hiring millennials. And after about 6 weeks to 3 months, they start peeling off. And so we worked together and came up with this idea that, you can prepare to going to court, you can be in court, or you can be in the field. And those are kind of the 3 tracks in probation. So with millennials, what we decided to do is we'll spend 6 weeks here, pull you out, give you a star, high five, well done, stick you over here for 6 weeks, experience this for 6 weeks, pull you out, high five, well done, stick you over here for 6 weeks and experience that. High five, okay, and then change their title, and we put them back here for 6 weeks, and then back here for 6 weeks. And usually after we did that 3 rounds, they would select which one of the tracks they wanted to be part of for the rest of their life. So they finally would then buy into that 20-year pension and that track that they could follow because it was interesting to them. So we want to make sure that you think about, how can we build in a certain amount of flexibility so that they don't leave because they think it's the only thing they're going to do. Now, a study by Millennial Branding said 45% of millennials and Gen Z will choose workplace flexibility over pay. I recently was reading a study in the Business Journal that said up to 17 to 20% less pay if they can work remotely. Manufacturing and the forging industry and the precision metal forming, the industries I work in manufacturing, but you can't do that remotely. We're not going to put a punch press in the garage for you. Changing jobs. The oldest generation changing jobs carry a stigma. Baby boomers changing put you behind. I took a class on interviewing from 1980 to 1983. It was the first edition of a book called The Interview Process by Cashel Stewart. It said you should not change jobs more often than 8 to 10 years. Otherwise, you'd look like a job hopper on your resume. I taught that class at Mankato State from 1993 to 1995. It was the 4th edition of that textbook. It had been updated. It said you shouldn't change jobs more than 5 to 7 years. Otherwise, you'd look like a job hopper. Take a look at the bottom of the slide. Millennials and Gen Z, changing jobs is part of my daily routine. You have one generation that says it's 5 to 7 years to 8 to 10 years, and you have somebody that wants to change this afternoon. Now, this is usually I get the question by the Gen Xers. How come you skip Gen X? The middle child is what they usually say. And you know what? I really do have empathy for Gen Xers. You had to adjust. You had to modify your behavior to support baby boomers and support veterans and traditionals, and you're moving into leadership positions, and now you need to adjust for millennials and Gen Zers. And no one really adjusted for you because you always showed up. You're reliable, dependable, and independent, self-reliant. You kind of created your own circumstance. It's not our fault. You're competent and skilled and confident. So we have that kind of friction. According to Forbes, 91% of millennials and Gen Z expect to stay in the same job less than 3 years. They'll decide within the first 6 weeks if they're going to stay or not. You got to make sure those first 45 days are fantastic. When you're onboarding, you want to make sure it's a big deal when they show up that day. You want to communicate with them a couple of times that week before. Looking forward to seeing you. Looking forward to joining the team. You have someone from the outside call from a distance, the vice president or an executive, and she says, "So great that you joined our team." You got to make sure someone's ready to take them to lunch that day, catch them doing something right. "Hey, I used to do that job." "Well done." You got to choreograph those first 45 days so they buy in, and then you drop little hints. You know why people work here for? You'll realize that in about the next 6 weeks why people build a career here. They love working here. Keep sprinkling that magic pixie dust in there. In a study by Recruit 5 found that while 83% of employed millennials and Gen Z understood job hopping can look bad, on a resume 86% said still would not stop them from changing positions. They kind of get to pick them now, don't they? According to Gallup, 60% of millennials and Gen Zers are open to a new opportunity right now. So there's always competition. And you're not competing with people here in these 2 counties or employees. In a funny sort of way, you're competing with the world. So you really got to take this seriously if you're going to need to build an organization with employees and staff. Because the mobility and the access to technology, you're competing with certainly everybody in the 48 states, if not other parts of the world. Feedback. That oldest generation feedback, no news is good news. I remember one summer my brother and I were home, we were the youngest too. And it was right after school's out. We were out on the feeding floor, we were pitching manure. And my brother says, "I'm so sick of pitching manure, I'm going to go get a job in town." The old man said, "Go ahead." So he got a job at the A&W, seasonal A&W. So after Labor Day, we're back on the feeding floor pitching manure. And my brother says, Mr. Anderson was his name. "Mr. Anderson never said anything about my work all summer." And my dad said, "Then you must have done a good job." No feedback for 3 months. He must have done a good job. Because he didn't get fired. I don't think that would work these days. I don't think we could go 3 months without telling someone they're doing a good job. Boomers, they started that annual performance appraisal system that we all enjoy. And I do think we should have an annual performance appraisal that is quite formal, but I think every 90 days we should have a little informal conversation about how things are going and anything else we need to do to open up the valves of communication or the equipment they may need. Now, Gen Xers, sorry to interrupt, how am I doing? Okay, they'll just stop in the door frame. And then Millennials and Gen Z feedback when I wanted a push of a button. Now, when it comes to training, that oldest generation is on-the-job training. That's what they want, or learned it the hard way. Boomers train them too much and they'll leave. They'll start a competing company. I'm sure you've seen that. Or consultancy, or once they develop these skills, they'll maybe move to another part of the country. Gen Xers, the more you train them, the longer they'll stay. The more they develop the skills, the more they'll take root. Now, Millennials and Gen Z continuous learning as a way of life, so we want to make sure that we have access to any of those educational properties that they can access with their mobile devices 24 hours a day. Now, when it comes to retirement, when it comes to our personal and professional outlook, that oldest generation, the reward was the gold watch, the pension. And my oldest brother, the cop, he will retire with a pension, which I think is relatively rare. And I was working with the state auditor's office in Minnesota on this topic, and I said this would be like the gold watch. And there's 3 guys in the back that said, "Here's ours." I go, "What?" "Gold watches, 35 years. And it was a Timex watch. It was a $100 watch. It wasn't like they were blowing the budget with those gold watches, but they're very proud of it. They stuck it out for 35 years. They got the gold watch. Baby boomers retool. They want to stay relevant. Generation Xers want to be at the cutting edge of technology. They want to make sure that they always have the latest in software and hardware. And Millennials and Gen Z, it's the recycle, it's the repurpose, it's the sustainability, it's the green type of approach to manufacturing and other areas of our economy. Our 29-year-old daughter is developmentally cognitively disabled. She lives independently. She can drive County Road B along Highway 36. She's a full-time security officer at the high school she went to 10 years earlier. And we're very proud of her. She's squeezed all of her skill set to the limit. And we call her a bulldozer because she pushes. But she's very effective for running at a 66 IQ. My God, she's accomplished quite a bit. So when it comes to this idea of recycling or repurposing, my wife and I, she wanted a dog, and she wanted to get one of those little buggy-eyed dogs, King Charles, King Charles Cavalier, what do they call it? A little buggy-eyed dog. So we went to friends of ours' daughter, Victoria, who had one of those buggy-eyed dogs, and we were sitting there, and I was at the dining room table, and my wife and Victoria and Shauna and a dog were wrestling around. And I looked at the dining room table, and I looked at the dining room table, I thought it was a butcher block dining room table. I thought, oh, that's interesting, a butcher block dining room table. Usually a butcher block thing would be in the kitchen, dining room table. Then I looked again, and then I saw these little dots in like a triangle shape, and then I realized it was part of a bowling alley. And I said, "Victoria, is your dining room table a chunk of a bowling alley lane?" "Yes, it is. Isn't it beautiful?" I'm taking 6 feet of a bowling alley and cutting it out and making a dining room table. So I went home and I looked at that cherry French provincial dining room and said, "We have a lot. That is kind of boring. A bowling alley in the dining room." I always wondered, did it smell like bowling shoes when she cleaned it? Anyway, so they really take that seriously. So this is what you're going to get with these slides. For every generation, you're going to get information about their core values. So this generation, the oldest generation, dedication, hard work, respect for authority, and honor. When it comes to their personality, they like to get it on a grand scale. It's important, those dates and those events. They're past-oriented, history absorbed, so we want to let them know the history of our organization and the department that they'll be supporting, or where they get their products and services. They believe in law and order. There's a right and a wrong. It's really black and white. And then when it comes to on the job, stable, thorough, loyal, hardworking. My dad just passed away a year and a half ago. He was on the farm the day before he died, 95 years old. My mom's 90, she's running the farm. I'm going to stop by and see her, and she's going to complain about how expensive fertilizer was this spring. She's going to complain about input, and how it's been a little drier than she liked. My God, Mom, you sound like a farmer. And I think she loves calling the shots. I think she loves it. So, liabilities, and that's with ambiguity and change. My goodness, there's been so much of it over the last few years. They're reluctant to buck the system. They believe there was a good reason why those policies exist, and uncomfortable with conflict, usually become reticent. Message that motivate them, your experience is respected here. It's important for us to hear what has and hasn't worked in the past, so see them as a consultancy in a way. Be open-minded to part-time work, full-time work. Now, these are people in their early 70s to mid-70s. We were talking earlier about one of my clients is the Iowa Telecommunications Association, and some of the women working in the offices at the cable TV and telephone company were there when cable came in, and they're in their 70s and 80s, but they love their job. They're capable, competent, and competent. And I can use your help and experience on this project, clear enunciation, good grammar, avoid profanity if they don't like that. Be sure to say please and thank you. Inform them what to expect, what the policies are, who and what, they need to pay attention to, and emphasize long-term goals. Always talk about their contribution over the next several years. Baby boomers, several days, several weeks, several months. This generation, the legacy, the long-term impact that it will have. So you want to make sure if you have clients that are seniors, you have access to someone on your staff that's a senior. Make that connection very simple and easy for both. And then this is a generation where men acted like men and women acted like women, so the gender roles and the way men and women had lifestyles were significantly different. So we need to respect that. And developing this generation, avoid the chance of losing face. You want to make sure you provide the training privately or semi-privately, and make sure you have a trainer that speaks the traditional language. And then use larger text for baby boomer, 14's a minimum, 16 is great. Takes up a lot of paper though. My readers are right there. Personal touch, handwritten notes. I had my oldest clients, when I would meet them the last time before they retired, they'd book some seminars and workshops, they'd pull out a hanging file with every handwritten thank you note I'd sent them over the years. They cherish those things. It's thoughtful, it's caring. Invest a little bit of time on that. Take photos of with them, with people stopping by. Find a coach that's respected, someone that would be able to support them and tell them about the long-term impact and acknowledge their experience and background. That's always very valuable. Okay, baby boomers. How many baby boomers do we have in here? 1946 or so? Okay. And earlier? Okay, wow, nice crop of baby boomers. Optimistic, team orientation, personal gratification, personal growth. You kind of built the Nightingale-Conant personal growth, the personal development industry. If you're a baby boomer, we survived the 50s and 60s. There are no childproof lids on medicine bottles, doors, or cabinets. I think my mom used to buy my Curachrome by the 5-gallon pail. You'd get scuffed up out there, she'd grab a paintbrush and the Curachrome and go, you'd be like, I still have orange stains on my skin from the Curachrome. Road bikes without wearing helmets, you get a load of gravel in the dooryard, you get out there in your 26-inch Hiawatha, 1 speed, jump off of there, take a handlebar to the gut, and that was fun. Hurt, but riding cars with no seatbelts, I remember that. That 67 Pontiac was the first time we had a car with seatbelts tumbling around back there. Riding the back of a pickup on a warm day was a treat. I remember the old man, we drive from our farm down to Grandpa's farm by Northrop, 22 miles on gravel road, 4 boys in the back of that pickup throwing corn cobs out there. It's just like dogs, man, that was fun. Do that now, you'd probably get pulled over by the sheriff. Back then, you got pulled over by the sheriff. They say, hey, your tailgate's down. The old man would say, I'll tap the brakes, make sure they're still back there. Okay. I'd get a ticket probably or something. I don't know what it is. The other thing was this, we drink water from a garden hose. That's why I haven't touched that bottle of water. Drank so much water out of a hose. Anyway, and our well was right next to the feeding floor. We had flavored water long before it was popular. But I'll tell you what, we're not allergic to anything. You go to the doctor, you just draw a line through everything. Now I don't have any allergies, nothing. I've been treated since I was a child. You fall, oh my God. Anyway, you fall out of trees. You break teeth, break bones. Nobody ever got sued. All the parents would say is, dumb kid. Talk about their own kid. Dumb kid. Oh my God. Yeah, anyway. So baby boomers had pursued their personal gratification uncompromisingly, recreationally. Baby boomers have always been cool. Baby boomers still think they're cool. It's been fun being a boomer till now. Some of the artists of the 60s are revising their lyrics with new words to accommodate the baby boomers. The Bee Gees, how can you mend a broken hip? Yeah, that's right. Johnny Nash, I can't see clearly now. Yeah, okay. It's true though. Baby boomers, service-oriented, driven, team players, not necessarily budget-minded, don't like going against other baby boomers, reluctant to go against their peers. A little bit sensitive to feedback, so you ask questions to get to the issues, you don't make statements. So you're important to our success, you're valued here, your contribution is unique and important. This unique thing is very critical. We're going to talk about uniqueness here for just a second. Tell them they're going to be a change agent, they're going to come in and make a difference or turn things around. They love that. Tell them how they're going to be a star or recognized for that contribution. Tell them it's a warm, dynamic, humane place to work. That's what they want. Discuss the near future, the next few weeks, the next few months, because that's what drives them to hit those numbers. Tell them you want to come in, them to come in and solve problems, to focus on the challenges, to turn things around. I really need, of all the people, I thought of it, I really need your talent here. Yesterday I was at a company in the Twin Cities, a manufacturing company, and they're talking about how they picked their president, and it was a person that plant manager had hired at a different manufacturing company, and when that presidency came available, says, he's the guy that should be our president. And so, of all the people they could select, your talent here, I mean, the decision making is so easy for a baby boomer if we include those messages. Know your baby boomer as an individual, what they do outside of work, so we can provide that unique personalized treatment. One of my clients is a project management institute in Wisconsin, and they always meet in Madison, Wisconsin at the Harley Davidson dealership, and I just sold my Harley. Anyway, but I had a Harley for 20 years, and I'd be there about every 3 years, and every time I spoke there, they'd go down to the gift shop, and they'd give me something that was Harley Davidson, and my Harley, in my laptop bag is my Harley Davidson wallet the last time I worked with them. And I've got Soft-Tail Boulevard in my garage, and the Soft-Tail's gone. But anyway, it got to be dangerous riding a motorcycle in the Twin Cities. People on their phones, eating, put on makeup. Had to go. Tell them they're going to make a difference. Provide developmental experiences, give them gold stars for their successes. Give them projects they can attach their name to, that everybody knows they were the one that made that happen. And whatever format they want educational materials, whether that's DVD or a book, anything like that, send them to seminars and conferences. They love that stuff. Personal touch, I really need you to do this for me. Give them lots of public recognition. Ask them how they'd like to be recognized. And then turn over the task and reward them for their hard work. Okay. Be nice, be warm. Please don't ever call baby boomers sir or ma'am. Baby boomer women in the room, how old is a ma'am? Baby boomer women in the room, how old is a ma'am? Older than I am, usually 20 years older than you are, yes. So listen very carefully when a baby boomer introduces themselves, how they'd like to be referred to. Very critical. Okay, Gen Xers, where are they? Oh, okay, about 20%, that's about what we have in the workplace. Technical literacy, informality, self-reliance, sound like you? Yep, that's the response I always get. Okay, good. Gen Xers, I want balance. Approach to authorities casual. They're a little bit skeptical. They won't take your word for it. They want it in writing. Independent, not intimidated by authority. They're creative. Impatient, poor people skills, inexperienced, cynical. Well, that took a nasty turn. Well, let's take a look at this. Asking for a raise. The oldest generation will talk about seniority and loyalty and how that should be rewarded. But a baby boomer read a book, How to Land a Raise You Deserve, and they're going to sell you on steps 1 through 20. Now, what a Gen Xer will do, they'll stop in the door and say, I need it, I deserve it. If I don't get it, I'm out of here. No, it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if it's poor people skills, but it's certainly straightforward, very direct. Now, our report claims that millennials and Gen Zers have terrible conversation skills. I don't know. When asked for a comment, they texted a series of crying and frowny emoji faces. So I'm not sure. Gen Xers tell them do it your way. We don't have a lot of rules here. We've got the latest hardware, software, and equipment. That's what they want to hear. When it comes to recruiting them, make sure in recruiting them, you say you want to have a life here. Balance is important. Work and life balance is important to us. Make it a fun, relaxed place to work so they enjoy it. And then tell them hands-off supervision. We understand you're independent, self-reliant, and we respect that, so they get to work independently. Show them their internal, intranet, and just give them the list of names of people to contact. They're not intimidated by anybody. And tell them again during orientation, you want them to have a life here. Be there when they have questions and back off. Okay, they don't mind being alone, and they have plenty of friends outside of work. They don't need you hanging around burning daylight. They are sometimes nomads. They might want to move to another department to learn a new set of skills so they maintain their employability. So let them know they'll get training in a broad range of diverse skills. Let them multitask, learn while they're on the job. It might be part of that their parents were probably veterans and traditionalists. But this is the generation that reads the least. So you want to make sure your training materials are brief, it's lists, it's bullet points, it just highlights the most important information so they can glance at it and get it when it's an email and an attachment. Delegate to them, give them projects, let them prioritize them. They may want and yearn for the, kind of that feedback. So stop by, give them positive, constructive feedback, but don't break stride, keep moving. They don't need you hanging around. Coach them to take personal responsibility. How do you plan on bringing this up at the meeting? What do you think the best approach would be? Turn it over to them, get them on and, get them a place at the table so that they can take over this next generation that's certainly going to be in leadership. Okay, millennials. Must have some millennials in here. 1, 2, oh, a whole bunch of them over there. A whole bunch over there. Optimistic, confident, achievement-oriented, expects diversity. Does that sound like you millennials? Yeah, okay, here we go. Nearly 3/4, 73% of millennials. This is a 2007 study by Schwab. 73% of teens think they'll be earning plenty of money when they're out on their own. Boys expect to earn about $173,000. Girls expect to earn more than $114,000 on average. Now, it's 2007. 17-year-olds, 2007, 15 years ago, they're 32 years old now. What happened in 2008? Yeah, the real estate market. Look at this, in 2015, same group, 48% of millennials said the American dream is dead. Oh man, for a baby boomer, it breaks my heart. 42% of teens now, this is 2016, think that we'll earn $75,000 per year by age 30, when the average salary of a 30-year-old is like 30 grand. They're still optimistic. Just not quite as optimistic. So let's take a look at the benefits of having them on the job. Their heroic spirit, multitasking capabilities, and techno-savvy, they just come plug and play. Need for supervision and structure, we had that when they were going to school, before school, after school, and weekend activities. Inexperience, particularly dealing with difficult people. So whatever information you have, scripts or ways to respond to people that become difficult, share it with them so they have the confidence to deal with those difficult conversations. A study by Dell and Intel found 82% of millennials and Gen Zers said that they are influenced by organizations' workplace technology when deciding to take a job. So make sure you highlight that to that younger generation. A Microsoft survey found that 93% of millennials and Gen Zers said technology helps them to thrive at work, and that having modern and up-to-date technology in the office is important. So we want to make sure we stay at the cutting edge. Messages that motivate. You'll be working with other bright, creative people. We should have a video of them on our website, working with other bright, creative people, and saying, this is why I work here, this is why we work here, this is why we love it. This generation has to see people in their generation working there, loving working there. So get some of that video on your website. You and your coworkers help turn this organization around. A little bit of baby boomer in there because their parents are baby boomers. And you can be a hero or heroine here. So we're also focusing on that heroic spirit. Learn about their personal goals and how you can support that with their career. They don't care whether you're male or female, as long as you can do the job. And then establish mentoring programs in your organization with the oldest employee and the youngest employee. It's kind of like a grandparent-grandchild relationship. It's the relationships that have the least friction. And then the older employee can share wisdom and experience, and the younger employee can share insight into the technology and kind of the whiz-bang ways to do their job. In a recent survey by Intelligence Group, 79% of millennials and Gen Zers said that they prefer a boss that acts as a coach or a mentor. So you might want to pick up a book. A great book by Tony Dungy is called Mentor Leadership, and it gives you a 7-step approach to becoming a good mentor to save and keep this generation. Recent survey, there we go. Millennials often name personal safety as a workplace issue, so we want to keep that in mind. They expect diversity, so let them know you expect diversity, and if they know anybody that would be willing to work at your organization, you're certainly open to that. Highly communicative, participation-oriented. They want a seat at the table to share their ideas. They grew up with technology. They like customization, so we want to make sure we provide opportunities to have some structure that supports that. They change jobs about every 18 months, so we might want to figure out a way to keep it interesting for them, and that they're comfortable to balance their personal life with their mobile devices. This is a generation that really kind of grew up being rewarded for participation, not necessarily achievement. I always say this is a generation that was born on third base and they believe they hit a triple. Our daughter, our youngest, was a competitive volleyball player, and her high school letter jacket, I mean, it was so heavy with medals and patches. It made it look like she was an Olympic hopeful. And I was going back for my, what would have been, 45th class reunion. And I cut weight like when I used to wrestle. So I wanted to wear that letter jacket. I had this bet, I said, stupid. I said it the previous summer. Hey, let's come back to the reunion and wear our letter jackets. Okay, so anyway, I'm in the hot tub for like 3 hours that day, to finally squeeze in. I look like a skin on a wiener when I put that thing on. But anyway, I came out into the family room with that letter jacket on, and that snotty little daughter of ours, she looked up and went, "You only have 2 medals?" I tried turned around and said, yeah, when I was in high school, you had to win. But you know what, she did have a 5-year volleyball college scholarship, so I guess she won too. Work, understand your purpose related to the mission. They seek employers that have service project, but community, your local community service project. When we talk about Gen Zers, it's global. Seek balance, 73% already worry about balance, and they do want personal face-to-face interaction with their boss, whoever that is. Flex Job Survey found 84% of millennials and Gen Zers cited work-life balance as the #1 factor they consider in a job. So every survey has a little bit different approach to it. They want structure and stability, so block out some time to talk with them about how things are going. Ask them why they chose to work for your organization. Make sure that's in your marketing materials when you're recruiting people to work for your organization, so we get them to match with that language. Recognize and reward them and tell them what their advancement opportunities are, because according to Forbes, the #1 reason millennials leave an organization is the lack of career opportunities. What's the next thing? Where am I headed in my career? So get that blocked out. So attracting them, you want to make sure you have video presentations, kind of a job branding video of someone their age, so they recognize that, and make sure it's on the social media networks that they tend to hang out on. And then create monthly reports, move from a function-based type of job, and I'll do that the rest of my life, to more of a project-centered, or what sometimes is called a results-oriented work environment, that there's a start time and an end time, and then we recognize that contribution. Recruiting them, they just want a competitive salary. They worry about an organization's reputation or leadership's reputation. 84% of millennials voted trustworthiness as their primary leadership concern at work. They want to make sure you live up to your words. Recruiting, ask current millennials why they work for you, and make sure that you have a social media platform that shows your positive community impact. Talk about loyalty and how they're going to make a difference, and that mission that you have, and then that you welcome diversity. Encourage them to network with anybody else in the organization, any other department, anybody they can learn from to understand how they're connected to the organization overall, and tell them whatever they notice, whatever they see, just please feel free to provide that feedback so we can get better. Ask them to share their observations without any reluctance or concern, and welcome their comments and ideas when it comes to community involvement, and have them take charge of that. You gotta kind of see your millennials as rock stars. They're going to be, if they're not already, the leaders or emerging leaders in your organization. They will be. They want to be the life of the party. They want a seat at the table. They want opportunities to perform, so give it to them. Be pleasant, understanding, caring, open-minded, and respectful. Of course, all of us want that in a boss or a mentor. But with millennials, you just have to turn it up a notch. Not too much, but just a little bit more to make sure they really do feel welcomed on a daily basis. Okay, Gen Zers. Last few minutes on Gen Zers. Oh, yeah, we have a pretty good crop of Gen Zers. Self-aware, self-reliant, innovative, goal-oriented. Sound like your generation? You're representing everybody at this moment. Appear to be more pragmatic than millennials. Okay, look at this one. Some studies show that Zers are more cautious, more financially conservative, and more globally connected than millennials. Millennials, the local community. Gen Zers, the global community, concerned about humanity's impact on the environment, human rights, poverty, racial inequality, and those are big issues. And then you show your organization's social responsibility and activities on your website, so they'll be attracted to that. Monster Track found that 79% of college students said the quality of the employer's website was important to whether or not to even apply for the job. So we got to spend a little bit of time freshening up that website. With development of the internet, as more of the world comes online, Gen Zers are more global in their thinking, interactions, and relatability. Gen Z is the most diverse generation in our country, last generation in the United States that is a slight Caucasian majority. Hooked on their smartphones, peer-to-peer social media messaging apps, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. A full 40% are self-identified digital device addicts. The other 60% weren't being completely honest in that survey. Zers live in a continuous world of updates. Their attention spans have gotten shorter than millennials, now down to about 8 seconds, where they can shift from one platform to another, one activity to another. It's really fascinating to watch. They're great at multitasking. I remember years ago I was at a CI, Chief Information Officer Conference in Denver, and I was speaking on change and change management and how to lead change and adversity, because they're always like going up sand hills, with technology. And there was a person saying that ADHD was actually the transformation of the human brain to deal with all of the changes that are occurring and the speed which those changes are occurring. Actually, it's the development of the human brain to absorb all of the stimulus and all the changes. Comfort with web-based research, often self-educate on YouTube and Pinterest. They place a priority, I always find this one kind of fascinating. They place a priority on fast they can find the information rather than whether or not they know the right information. Really kind of interesting. We'll drive with our youngest daughter, we'll ask her a question, we're pretty sure she'd know the answer. She'll go, oh, I don't know. Then about a minute later she gives us the answer, we're like, I looked it up. And then one time we're driving with her and then we asked her a question, she goes, oh, I don't know. And then we hear a little voice, and my wife turns around, who are you talking to? Oh no, and I'm on an advice app. It was like The Exorcist. My wife said, if you want any advice, I'll tell you. Some days I really love her. A Stanford study says social media and the Gen Z are smarter. They examined essays written by college freshmen over the last 100 years, and the day papers were longer, better research, and more complex. But that could be because kids cut and pasted them from Wikipedia. Just kidding. I should probably have that warning up there. Baby boomers are their grandparents rather than their parents, and I think millennials are old, so that's kind of a gift for millennials. They seek work and life balance, so it's really called integration. They have much more personal relationships with their coworkers and go out to socially after work with their coworkers. Interested in careers that allow work and life to coexist and often blend together. So this is what we have with this generation. They're tech savvy, they're socially conscious, they have shorter attention spans, they're ambitious, and they are job hoppers. They will move. But they're also, the nice thing is they're boomerang employees. And what that means, I think I just hit this one. I don't hit that one, I just leave that there. They will work for you and they may leave, thinking the grass is greener somewhere else. But then in maybe 6 months or so, they'll come back and say, is that position still open, or can I come back and work with you? And they come back. And it makes the onboarding so simple because they already know how things work. They already understand the job. They already know your culture. You don't have to spend all that time getting them in the right frame of mind. So this is what I'd like you to think about when we talk about law number 5, tailor the content to fit the relationship. You might get a phone call from a veteran or traditional saying, hey, why don't we meet for breakfast? I'd like to talk with you, or lunch. And you'll sit down and have a meal together. Then you'll be walking out and you'll have a message from a baby boomer saying, stop by my office, I'd like to talk with you. And then you'll open up your email and there'll be a message, email message with an attachment from a Gen Xer saying, hey, take a look at this. And then a millennial will send you a text message and you'll respond to that. And then Gen Z will send you, I don't know, Instagram or a Snap Story to give you an update. But this is what I want you to think about. Remember that old golden rule, do unto others as you would like them to do unto you? It really has to be do unto others as they'd like to be done unto when it comes to generational communication. We do need to roll up our sleeves and develop a certain amount of skill for all of those different platforms that they would choose to use. Just like if it was a customer, they'd rather have you call, or they'd rather have an email, or they'd rather do it online. We need to make an adjustment how we communicate with those other generations as they'd like to be communicated to. Now, this is why this is an important topic today. You go back 200 years ago, average life expectancy in this country was only 38. It was rare that people lived in their 60s and 70s. You go back 100 years ago, average life expectancy in this country was only 45. Okay? That's why they set Social Security at 59, because no one's going to live that long. Okay? Today, we have people from 5 generations showing up at the same workplace at the same time, and we just need to make some adjustments in how we communicate with each and every one. Now, if you have any questions anytime on anything, I don't care if it's 2 days, 2 months, 2 years from now, you can always contact me. I'll go over any of the information over the phone with you free. These slides will be available for you on both websites. I think we have one other thing that I need to announce. Those of you that are board of supervisors or board of directors, immediately following the presentation, please come up here for photos, take photos of you. And other than that, I will be out here on the way out the door with a fistful of $10 bills because I understand people in Iowa carry nothing smaller than a 20. But if you buy the green book for $10, you can pick any one of the other 4 books for free because my wife and I moved to Florida in January and I don't want all those books to Florida. So my whole goal is that all the books that I brought will be gone, and for $10 you can pretty much take as many as you like. Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any concerns? Anybody I need to apologize to this morning? Otherwise, thanks for coming out this morning. And Board of Directors, Board of Supervisors, please come up front for those pictures. And